If you've ever deployed something in Azure and thought, did I configure this securely? Then you'll want to see this. Microsoft actually built a CLI tool that reviews your entire subscription for misconfigurations. Today we put that to the test. But what if it's more than just secure configuration? What if I could get best practice tips and cost recommendations as well? I spend hours checking Azure environments for compliance and security, so when I found a CLI tool that promises to automate this process, I had to try it. I'm talking about, of course, AZQR, or Azure Quick Review. And this is huge because, just like I said, when you're working with Azure, you may go to the Azure Advisor and you see, oh, I have some recommendations here. So I know that I can also go to Defender for Cloud and then I see recommendations over there. But also I can go into Azure Policy and then I see I have resources that are non-compliant. And what does that mean? Like, what should I focus on? And the base answer is that you need to focus on everything. And that is where this tool can come in really handy, because it can actually consolidate all of this information just via the command line, and then we can get a nice report that we can take to the customer and look at it together, or we can take it and upload it somewhere where we can also have history over what we've done in the environment. So here you can see a list of things that it contains. Like I mentioned, it does contain the advisor recommendations, and it also contains Defender for recommendations. But then you also have things such as cost. If you have resources that are out of scope or they were not scanned, they can show up as well. And if you're using Azure Arc, it could also cover some areas of Azure Arc for you. They also have a load of supported Azure services, which you can see here. And that's great for us because the more services that are supported, the more help we can get from this tool. So I'm not going to talk too much about it. I'm just going to get into it and show you how the tool actually works. But before we do that, we have to install it. And I'm using a Mac right now, so I've installed it with Brew. But you could also install it on Windows, and if you're on Linux, here's the curl command for you to use as well. An important part here is that when you are running this shell, like I will be running it in my terminal, I'm going to be authenticated using the Azure CLI. So it's very important that if you are running this tool, or if you're running this in a pipeline and perhaps you are authenticating with some other service principal or a user managed identity, it's very important that the identity that is running the command line tool needs to have at least reader permissions of the resources that they scan. Okay, so if I come to the terminal and I enter AZQR, this is an indication that the tool has been installed properly on my machine. So I get basically the help section of this, and then we have a bunch of things we can have here. So if we wanted to see all the types that were supported again, we could go to GitHub, or you could just write AZQR types in your terminal and you will get this list here as well. And we will come back to that because that's a pretty handy command to have. The next command we want to take a look at is what rules are we actually looking at? And if I just type this, we get a bunch of stuff, which this is quite hard to read. But what we could do is we could say AZQR rules, and then we'll just output this to a rules.markdown file. So that's been done. Then we can open Visual Studio Code and take a look. So what we have here now is the rules.md, but we could right click this and say open preview. And here we have some information about what we're looking at. Each and every recommendation has a ID. It also shows which type it is covering. It shows which category it is in: high availability, security. You may see things in here such as resilience or performance. Those will come from the Azure Advisor. And if you didn't know this, the Azure Advisor is your rule sets for generating the report for how well your environment is following the well-architected framework. Not to be confused with the Cloud Adoption Framework. Those are two different frameworks. But we also get an impact, like, is it a big deal? So apparently that the Azure front door, if it doesn't have a diagnostic, it's a low impact. But if you haven't properly configured the availability for your front door, you may have SLA issues. Like, you cannot guarantee a certain uptime, and then that's a high impact. Potentially your application could go offline. And if you want to learn more, I think this is super cool. They have the Learn hyperlink in here, which we could click up. And here we get some more information that we could read. So a bunch of good stuff in here. But I guess the big command in this tool is the scan command, which is gonna actually scan your environment. So if we say AZQR scan and we look at the help file for this, you can see we have a bunch of things. So we have some available commands. You could scan automation accounts or like a specific service that you would want to use. There are some flags you could enter. So if, for example, if you append -- costs, you would get the cost impact basically. All right, but let's actually run the command then. So if I do AZQR and just enter scan, I can scan my entire subscription, which maybe that's what you want to do, maybe that's not what you want to do, but that's what I want to do right now. We can take a look at other options later. So I'm just going to select enter here. And we should see it kick off. So here we get a bunch of information about what's happening. So you can see it's applying the rule sets and it's mentioning the rule IDs and everything of that sort. And now you can see it's actually reached my subscription. Now it's actually scanning my subscription for resources that are in scope and that is in support, and it's going to generate a report for me basically. All right, that finished. It took about a minute. And if we don't specify anything like we didn't do, it's just going to output an Excel file, which we can find here. And then we can take a look at it. So if I just stay in my terminal, I can say open dot, and I'm going to open the directory I am with Finder. I can double click the Excel file just so we can take a look at this. And here I get my Excel file, and we're basically getting a Excel version of what we can do within the terminal. So we get the recommendations, what are the rule sets, the resource types that it has found, and a bunch of other things. And we're going to look into this as well, but we don't really want to use Excel for this. I mean, it's good for storing this, so maybe if we ran this bi-weekly or once a month or something like that, we would store the Excel file so we have a snapshot of the environment in that state, which we can compare to later. But we actually want to do something else right now whilst we're looking at this. So in the terminal, if we do AZQR help, we can see we have a command that is called show. Launch a local web dashboard for AZQR reports. So I want to do that. And what I usually do is then, I know I want to use the show command, so I will enter show and then I'll do -- help to get the information. What do I need to give it? So it seems like I have one required flag, which is the file or file string. And we are in the directory where we outputted the Excel. So we'll just do AZQR show. And then we want to look at the file that we outputted in this directory. So if we say AZQR and then we pick the Excel file and we get the dashboard launched. And here is, it's a lot more beautiful than looking in the Excel. Don't get me wrong, Excel is awesome for certain things, but right now we want to have something beautiful. So think you are like demonstrating this for a customer, or it's time to review it. So you save it as an Excel, so you have the snapshot for history. You can go back, but then you want to go actually and look at the things. Then you want to have the dashboard. So we get some basic information here at the overview page, but we can start drilling down into this and select best practices, and we can select recommendations. So here we get the recommendations just like we saw in the Excel file. And here we can also see impacted resources. For many of these, we can see it's 0, but it's still going to show the recommendation anyways. But what we could do is we could set implemented here to false perhaps, and now we get resources actually impacted and by which recommendation they are impacted. So apparently it feels like Network Watcher should have tags, and yeah, maybe, I don't know. It depends on the situation, I guess. But apparently it's found that I have a few app services where I've not set the scaling correctly. So I should set the minimum instance count to 2 for my app service. And that's going to help me for the category called scalability. We can drill down into certain categories like you have here. So you have the ones I was talking about before, like the security, high availability, governance, business continuity, and things of that nature. So we don't have to filter it that way. We could go to best practices and then go to impacted resources, and then we get another view. It is a little bit of the same, but here it's more drilled down into the resources that we are actually using, that we care about. And then we have a certain page for the Azure Advisor. And again, like I mentioned, when you hear the Azure Advisor and the recommendations that come from there, think about well-architected frameworks and the 5 pillars of that. You can actually see the pillars here. I just Googled it. So you can see it's reliability, security, cost optimization, operational excellence, and performance efficiency. But what more do we have? So we have the inventory, we have the resource types, like apparently I have 3 Websites could be good. Resource inventory has another page where I can actually see what resource group are they in, what location and the type. So just like another type of view. And this is pretty cool. They have the resource ID, which I could copy this way. A lot of things in Azure happens with resource IDs, so that's pretty neat to have that, so I can just copy and paste it. And then out of scope. I guess I did actually have some things out of scope. And then we can come into security, and security is all about Microsoft Defender. So here we can see, this is basically the Defender for Cloud plans. This is something you control from the Microsoft Defender for Cloud menu in the Azure portal, and then you can come down to environment settings. We can look for my subscription. Then we can see here Limburg Tech Development and what plans do I have activated. So I have basically all the plans activated, mostly for this demo, I should say. But then I get like standard level plan for containers, for virtual machines. There's like a few different plans within that, or at least it used to be. I have to double check. Yeah, plan 2. Previously you could have a plan 1. I think this one is, yeah, you can see it doesn't have all the features. So here's what it doesn't have. And then server plan 2, it has all those features. But I could also see which services I don't have activated, and then they are set as free. And then we also had the Defender recommendations. So basically that's when you, in the portal, if you exit out of this and you come to recommendations, you can see a bunch of recommendations about your environment here. Those are the same recommendations that are going to end up in here. It may be confusing, like I have some things in Defender, I have some things in Azure Policy. But you should know that all of the recommendations in Defender for Cloud, they are actually Azure Policy in the background. You see, when you create a subscription, it gets the foundational CSPM plan enabled from Defender for Cloud by default. And what that effectively does is that it's going to apply the Microsoft Security Benchmark, or sometimes still called the Azure Security Benchmark Policy Initiative, at your subscription. But I can deal with recommendations in here as well, so I can see what category they are for. I can see what resources and a little bit of a description about it. Speaking of policy, we do have the final tab here, or not the final tab, but I don't have anything with ARC. But with governance, I could see Azure Policy, and then we had the policy assignment name, and then you can see Security Center built in, and I'm fairly sure this is the one that I was talking about, this policy initiative. But there are some others, and what you could do if you wanted more information about a certain recommendation here is that you could copy the policy definition name, which in this case is a GUID. So if I copy this, I come back to Azure and I search for policy. I can go into the policies. I can go into definitions, and then I can paste the ID here. And then I get the actual policy definitions that storage accounts should prevent shared access keys, or shared key access. And I can read more information about it, like what are the parameters, what values do they accept. I can see parameters here as well, if you don't want to look in the JSON format of it. I like the JSON format of it, but I'm a little bit weird like that. And then finally we have cost analysis. I don't know if I should show you this. Is this good to show? I mean, all of this is gonna be demo stuff. Even though I have a subscription called production, it's still just demo things because it's my lab environment. But here at least you could go through with your customer and see how much money are we spending on certain things. How much money are we spending on Key Vault and Log Analytics? I guess Log Analytics is good because you also want to see how much you're paying for logging. Defender for Cloud, obviously, depending on what plans you have activated, they work in a little bit of a different way. You could have like the Defender for Storage. Nowadays, I think it's like $10 base cost per storage account, and then it's more per transaction. Like you would have to look into it. But that's awesome. So I can Control C to quit that local web server I had. Yeah, we could do the AZQR scan -- help, and then you get a little bit more information like we were looking at earlier, but you could specify if you only wanted to scan a certain resource group, for example, we could filter it this way. What we also can do, you probably saw this a little bit earlier, but I do have a YAML file here, and we can actually use this YAML file to help us run the command. Why would I want to do this when I can just run it in the terminal? Well, maybe you would run this in a action or something to that effect, or maybe you run this in a script and you point towards the YAML file or something similar to that. Perhaps you want one report that covers certain resource groups, but you want to exclude others. So what I've done here is I have pre-populated with the subscription I want to scan against. I have also said I only want to scan this certain resource group for this example. And inside this resource group, I have a bunch of resources, but I actually don't want to scan all of them. So then we can come back to one of the commands we were typing in the beginning, which was AZQR types. And then I get all the types that are possible to use with this. And what I could do is I could say AZQR types, and I could do something like grep for web perhaps, and that wasn't what I wanted. I guess it's perhaps site, yep. So Microsoft.web/site, so I only want to scan my app services. So then I could see that the command or the resource type for this router was ASP, so let's do that. Let's not worry about excluding anything for now, we can just comment that. And then we can do AZQR scan, and we can say -- filters. And I want to filter on my YAML file. And then you can see it's gonna scan again, but at the top there you could see it's adding a subscription to include and adding a resource group to include. Just doing things just to limit the scope of this a little bit. So now that scan is complete. So if we do AZQR show and we select the latest file we have, should be this one. We can see now we have less things. So if I just go to the inventory and go to resource inventory, I only have this. So do with that what you will, but it just enables more options to run things. Perhaps there are things that, yeah, we know they are not following suit, but we have accepted risk for those resources. We don't necessarily have to see them in our reports anymore, so let's filter them out. Or perhaps you don't have responsibility over everything inside the resource group or the subscription. Perhaps you are only responsible for your things, and then you could generate the report simply for that. So like I mentioned, you could have this running on a schedule where you could have a history, a snapshot of your environment, like how your security posture progresses or is not progressing over time. It is very nice to have this where you could sit down with a customer who is perhaps not as technical as you, or perhaps they are, but they want to understand why we want to do certain things, and then we can see, yeah, we have this resource and it wants this recommendation or this remediation to happen. It's because of this recommendation and it's because of this reason. And you may agree with the recommendation or maybe not. Like, the goal is never to make sure that, yeah, we would have 100%. That is just not how the world works. You will always have things that are things we can't implement because it'll be too costly, or maybe it costs more than it is worth it security-wise. But these are things you learn over time when you work with the Defender and Advisor suites and the recommendations that they give, and just working with customers in general. But let me know if you have more ideas for how you could implement this tool. And also, while you're here, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and that you like the video. And if you like this type of content, I have a bunch of other things related to Azure on my channel, so make sure you go and check that out. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.